The Janus Protocol ACT-1. The City of Whispers. The city of Etheria was a ghost, perpetually draped in a shroud of fog that drifted in from the slate-gray sea, clinging to the salt-stained stone of the old buildings like a final, rattling breath. It wasn't a city that revealed itself honestly. It offered itself in fragment. The mournful basso of a distant foghorn, the percussive drumming of rain on a tin roof, the hiss of tires on wet asphalt. It smelled of salt and decay, of diesel fumes and damp earth, a permanent, melancholic perfume. Here, secrets were the local currency, and the truth was a commodity too expensive for most to afford. The rain in Etheria had a personality. It could be a fine, atomized mist that beaded on wool coat, or a torrential, angry downpour that turned gutters into raging river. Tonight, it was the latter. In the heart of this labyrinth, in an office above a pawnshop filled with the ghosts of forgotten treasures, worked the brothers Thorn. Their office was a sanctuary of ordered chaos. Walls lined with bookshelves overflowed with criminology texts, psychological treatises, and city maps bristling with colored pins marking territories of grief and violence. The air, thick with the scent of old paper, stale coffee, and ozone from the sputtering neon sign outside their window that blinked Thorn and Thorn investigations into the indifferent night, was their natural element. Sam and Dean, twins, but not mirrored. To see them together was to witness a living paradox. Sam was the anchor, a man who moved with a deliberate economy of motion. He saw the world as a great, chaotic equation that could be solved with enough logic and patience. His desk was a testament to his mind. Files squared away, pens aligned, a single, steaming mug of black coffee placed precisely on its coaster. His gaze was analytical, dissecting, missing nothing. He found comfort in the immutable laws of physics and the predictable patterns of human desperation. Dean was the storm. He paced the office like a caged predator, a restless energy contained in a body that seemed too small for it. His desk was a maelstrom of cold case files, empty coffee cups, and cryptic notes scrawled on napkins. He was the one who noticed the tremor in a liar's hand, the averted gaze that betrayed a guilty heart, the lie hidden in a half-truth. His eye, a shade darker than his brother's, caught the subliminal details that Sam's logic would dismiss as irrelevant variables. They were two halves of a single blade, the only private investigators in Etheria willing to follow a mystery into the abyss, because they understood better than anyone that the abyss is usually where the truth resides. This particular mystery began, as all great tragedies do, with silence where a life used to be. The call, a crackling voice on their ancient radio scanner, was a formal request from the Etheria PD, a high-profile one. Detective Miller, a weary veteran whose cynicism was as much a part of his uniform as his badge, was on the other end. Thorn, he'd grunted, got one for you, up on the cliff. Rich guy, weird scene. My guys are stumped, and the brass is breathing down my neck. Get up here, and try not to make me regret this. The drive up to the mansion was a slow climb through winding roads, the headlights of their vintage sedan cutting feeble tunnels through the oppressive fog. The city below became a blurred constellation of distant, weeping light. The mansion, when they arrived, was a stone behemoth that seemed to be in a perpetual, losing battle with the encroaching ivy and the relentless sea air. Dr. Alistair Finch, a renowned psychologist and celebrated cartographer of the mind's fractured landscape, lay dead in his study. The room had been desecrated, yet with a chilling precision. A massive mahogany desk, that fortress of academia, was overturned, its contents scattered as if by a localized earthquake. Books on human duality, consciousness, and Jungian archetypes lay on the floor like fallen soldiers with broken spines. A large, ornate mirror in a tarnished gilt frame was shattered, its silvered shards reflecting a dozen distorted, cubist versions of the grim scene. Dr. Finch lay on a Persian rug, the deep reds of the pattern darkened by an even deeper red of his own. His eyes were open and fixed on the frescoed ceiling, as if contemplating a truth now available only to him. There were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry. This was not a crime of passion. It was an execution, meticulous and cold. Sam knelt, his focus absolute. The city outside, the wail of distant siren, the drumming of the rain, all of it faded away. There was only the body, the room, the puzzle. He pointed a gloved finger at Finch's hand, which clutched a small, tarnished silver locket. With tweezers from his kit, he gently opened it. The locket was empty. ACT-2. Echoes and riddles. He preached about the two wolves inside each of us. Dean muttered, his gaze sweeping the room, his mind absorbing the scene not as a single picture, but as 100 conflicting data points. Looks like one of his wolves finally bit. The killer was let in, or he had a key, Sam stated in a flat voice, his eyes tracing the impossible geometry of the bloodstain. This feel theatrical, staged. Look at the the book. They're all open to chapters on doppelgangers and split personality. This isn't just a murder, it's a statement. Their interrogations over the next 48 hours yielded little more than a colorful tapestry of grief and professional jealousy. A distraught assistant, a young woman named Clara, told of Finch's recent obsession with a revolutionary new therapy. They met her in a sterile, white-walled cafe that felt alien in the city's gloom. He called it the Janus Protocol. She sobbed, twisting a shredded tissue in her hand. He said it could unify a fractured mind, heal the deepest psychological wound. He was on the verge of a breakthrough. He was so excited, but in the last few weeks, he became frightened. He spoke of his prize patient, his perfect specimen, but never a name. He said the patient's mind was a perfect, mirrored labyrinth, and that sometimes, he felt he was the one being studied. A rival from the university, a pompous, self-satisfied man named Dry, Alistair Blackwood, was less charitable. They interviewed him in his own opulent office, a sterile counterpoint to Finch's chaotic study. Alistair was a showman. He sneered contemptuously, polishing his spectacle. His Janus Protocol is dangerous, unethical pseudoscience. He was playing God in people's head, chasing a ghost he called the altar. It was only a matter of time before one of his little experiments bit back. Frankly, he got what he deserved. Later that night, back in their office, the only sound was the relentless drumming of rain on the glass. The world outside was a watercolor left in a downpour. Sam methodically sorted through Finch's confiscated file, a mountain of academic jargon and clinical observation, searching for a single solid fact in a sea of theory. Dean stood at the window, looking down at the glistening street, his reflection a ghostly twin in the glass. A barely perceptible tremor ran through his hand as he brought a cup of lukewarm coffee to his lip. He'd had this tremor for years, a subtle vibration that seemed to hum in tune with the city's dark energy, but lately, it had worsened, becoming more noticeable in moments of silence. No obvious suspect. Sam finally broke the silence, the frustration evident in his voice. No disgruntled patience on record. Nothing tangible. Only whispers and shadow. Except for the whisper, Dean replied, his voice distant, his gaze still fixed on the street below, that is born only of silence. This room, it was too neat. The chaos was staged. It was a performance. For us, ACT3, the Chimera's diary. The hours bled together, marked only by the emptying and refilling of coffee cups. Sam, fueled by a stubborn refusal to accept the absence of logic, kept digging, convinced Finch had left them a map. And then, he found it, not in the main file, but hidden in an old, archived case file from a decade ago. It wasn't just a false bottom, it was a puzzle box, requiring a sequence of pressed panels to open. Inside lay a worn, leather-bound diary, its pages filled with a dense, spidery script. The inscription on the first page sent a chill down his spine. Subject: Project Chimera. Experiments in personality splitting. The diary was a descent into Finch's obsession, a terrifyingly intimate chronicle. The primary personality, let's call him the host, is unaware of the other's existence, Finch wrote. He suffers from significant dissociative amnesia, blackouts he cannot account for. The other, the alter, is fully aware. He is the protector, the shadow, born of a trauma the host cannot face. He communicates only in riddles, in symbols. To speak to him is to navigate a minefield of psychological defenses. Finch's notes grew more feverish, a chilling mixture of clinical detachment and obsessive excitement. He wasn't trying to cure the subject, he was trying to map the architecture of his fractured psyche. Today, the alter surfaced during hypnosis. He spoke of a broken boy in a dark room. He is fiercely protective, viewing my attempts at integration as an attack. He sees me as the enemy. He called me the key master and warned me that some doors should never be unlocked. Then, near the end, a final, chilling entry, dated a week before the murder. A name, half erased, the ink smudged as if by a tear or a hasty, trembling hand. It was only a single letter, but it was enough. The subject's resistance is increasing. The alter is becoming dominant. The protocol is failing, or perhaps working too well. The walls are crumbling. I'm afraid D.N. is losing control. Sam slowly raised his eye, the silence in the room suddenly becoming vast, suffocating. His heart was a cold stone in his chest. His gaze fell on his brother, who was still looking out the window, lost in the rain-soaked world below. The city's neon lights painted a broken, shifting mask on Dean's face. One moment red, the next blue, but never whole. For the first time, Sam felt a flicker not of concern, but of genuine fear. ACT4. The ghost in the glass. A subtle poison had entered their partnership. Sam found himself watching his brother, cataloging his mood, the deepening shadows under his eye, the way his hand trembled more frequently. Dean, sensing the shift, became became more withdrawn, the easy camaraderie between them replaced by a tense, unspoken distant. Conversations became clipped, functional, stripped of their usual rhythm. They met Finch's former colleague, a nervous man named Dry, Miles Corbin, in a smoky jazz club where the saxophone wept a song of regret. Corbin was a frayed nerve of a man, constantly checking his watch. Finch was playing with fire, Corbin whispered, his eyes darting around the club as if he expected to see a ghost. Deep hypnosis, memory implantation. He believed he could isolate a second personality and communicate with it directly. But his subject was unique, a perfect split, dangerously unstable. Alistair said it was like looking into the abyss, and the abyss looks back at you with two different pairs of eyes. He told me the subject's mind was so complex, it could create entire narratives, false memories, to protect itself. He called the alter the architect. Alistair said he feared the architect was learning from him, studying him, and that the therapy was becoming a battle of will. Mach, the 10th of December 2025-2017. That night, driven by a new, unspoken dread, Sam returned to the crime scene alone. The police tape was gone, but the ghost of the violence remained. He stood in the center of the study, trying to see it not with his own analytical eye, but through the fractured lens of the case. He imagined the raid, the performance. His gaze fell upon the shattered mirror. He ran a gloved finger along a jagged edge, and found it, a single dark hair, almost invisible against the tarnished frame. He carefully bagged it, his hands not quite steady. This was no longer just an investigation, it was a betrayal. ACT-5, A Stranger's Face. The lab report was a death sentence to his denial. Familial match to Dean Thorne. Sam sat alone in the office, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. He told himself there could be a dozen explanations, but the fortress of his logic was crumbling. Sandcastles against a rising tide of horror. The call came an hour later. A pawnshop owner from the Port District, a gruff man with a voice like gravel, a man matching Dean's description, had tried to sell a vintage watch, a family heirloom, their father's watch, the day before Finch's murder. He seemed agitated. The owner rasped into the phone, confused, kept looking over his shoulder like he was being followed. I told him I needed identification, and he just ran, left the watch on the counter. Sam drove down to the port, the city light smearing across his rain-streaked windshield. He held the watch in his gloved hand. It was a tangible piece of their shared past, now tainted, an artifact in a crime he couldn't comprehend. He found Dean in an alley behind their office, leaning with his back against the wet brick wall, his face pale. He held up the small evidence bag with the hair. He didn't mention the watch yet. They found this at Finch's, Sam said in a level voice, behind which, as behind a carefully constructed wall, he hid an inner storm. It matches yours, Dean. Dean stared at the bag, his eyes wide with a sincere, soul-deep bewilderment that was more frightening than any lie. That's impossible, he stammered, shaking his head. I was with you that whole night. We were on a stakeout in the warehouse district. I don't remember. I would have remembered that. Later, Sam saw Dean trying to retrace his own step, poring over their calendar, his face tight with concentration. It's fog, Dean said, his voice raw with frustration. Hours of it. I know where I was, but I can't see it. He slammed his fist on the desk. It's like watching a movie with missing scene. ACT-6. The widening cracks. The pressure began to visibly erode Dean. He became more erratic, his moods swinging from manic energy to sullen silence. The nightmares started, violent episodes that left him drenched in sweat, with no memory of what terrors had chased him through the dark. He was a stranger in his own mind. Sam once found him standing in the middle of their office in the dead of night, staring at his own reflection in the dark window, whispering to it. Sam's secret surveillance became a painful ritual. He followed Dean one afternoon, watching him wander through a part of town they hadn't been to in years. He saw Dean stop and stare at his own reflection in a shop window, his head cocked as if studying an unfamiliar face. The sight was so profoundly disturbing that Sam had to turn away, a wave of nausea washing over him. A new clue surfaced, something Finch had clearly intended for them to find. Tucked inside one of Finch's books on Greek mythology, Sam found a small, folded note. On it was a series of numbers and a single word, Orpheus. He showed it to Dean, whose reaction was unexpectedly violent. It's nothing, Sam. A dead end. He snapped, his agitation far outweighing the discovery. Why are you pushing this? It's a distraction. The rift between them had become a chasm. That night, Sam realized Dean wasn't just losing time, he was actively hiding something, even from himself. ACT-7. The digital ghost. Sam's investigation became a nocturnal obsession. With Dean asleep or out wandering the rain-slicked streets, Sam plunged into Finch's encrypted digital archive. It felt like like chasing a ghost in the machine, a desperate search for an answer he was beginning to fear he already knew. The late nights bled into early morning, fueled by black coffee and a growing dread. The word from the note, Orpheus, was the key. A password. He typed it in, and the screen flickered. A file opened. It wasn't research note. It was a collection of transcripts of therapy session. Audio file. When Sam put on his headphones and pressed play, the blood drained from his face. The first voice belonged to Finch, calm and clinical. Tell me about the dark room, Dean. The second voice, younger, terrified, was his brother. I can't. He won't let me. The recordings detailed years of session. They spoke of a deep-rooted trauma from their youth, an event so terrible it had splintered Dean's psyche. A fire, a locked room, a broken boy who had to watch something no child should ever see, a secret Dean had carried alone for 2 decades. ACT-8, the architect revealed Sam listened for hours, a voyeur to his own brother's hidden agony. He learned of the alter, the other personality born in the fire to absorb the pain. He heard the alter's voice, a cold, flat monotone, a chilling counterpoint to Dean's emotional turmoil. And then he found the final clinical note from Finch, typed and dated just 2 days before his death. Subject's real name, Dean Thorne. Finch's note, the subject's consciousness resists direct access to the trauma. The alter has constructed a subconscious fail-safe, a defense mechanism of incredible complexity. He has turned his therapy into a detective case, a mystery that he must solve with his brother, the only one he trusts, to face the truth without shattering his psyche. The investigation is the cure. He has cast himself as both detective and suspect, and he will lead himself to the truth. I fear, however, that in this narrative he has created, a victim was required for the setup, and he has chosen me. He is the most brilliant, most terrifying mind I have ever encountered. He has built his own prison and is now handing his brother the key, but I fear the door opens into madness. The chilling truth was revealed not in a flash, but in a slow, agonizing dawn. The staged crime scene, the perfectly placed clue, Dean's memory loss, the hair, the watch. It was all by design. Dean's design. The architect. He wasn't just the investigator. He was the victim, the suspect, the murderer, and the architect of the whole crime. Sam looked at a framed photo on his desk of 2 smiling boys, an image of an innocence that had been a lie all along. He could see it now, a shadow in young Dean's eyes he'd never noticed before. ACT-9, the pier of judgment. The pier was a skeleton, jutting out into the black, churning sea. The wind howled, lashing with horizontal streams of rain that stung the skin. A single neon sign of an abandoned arcade flickered, casting a sickly, pulsating green light on the wet plank. Sam stood at the edge, the cold spray on his face, the roar of the waves a reflection of the storm within him. He heard footsteps behind him, steady despite the storm. It was Dean. He looked strangely calm, a look of tragic serenity on his face. In his hand, he held the empty silver locket. He had found it, the final clue. You figured it out, didn't you, Sam? Dean's voice was quiet, the wind almost carrying it away. The game is over. Why, Dean? Sam's voice was hoarse with a grief so deep it felt like a physical weight. Why him? Dean's composure began to crack, the mask crumbling. He was pushing too hard. The Janus Protocol. He was trying to force the memories out, to unify me. His voice became distorted, for a moment acquiring Finch's precise, academic intonation. He didn't understand. You can't just erase a part of yourself, not when that part is what holds you afloat. He looked down at the locket, his own voice returning, now choked with emotion. He made me remember that night, the real one, the one in the fire. You were safe outside, but I was still in there. I saw. The memory flashed before his eyes, a frantic, blurry vision, an argument in the study, Finch's calm insistent, Dean's growing panic as he felt the altar surfacing, a cruel, impulsive shove, Finch's fall, the sharp, nauseating crack as his head hit the corner of the desk, silent, horror, and then, nothing, a void, a blackout. His mind, in an act of horrifying self-preservation, had rebooted, erasing the event and creating a new reality, a puzzle that needed to be solved. ACT-10, a verdict of silence. I didn't know what else to do, Dean whispered, tears now mixing with the rain on his face, tracing clean paths through the city's grind. The blackouts were getting worse. He said I was losing myself, and my mind. It built what I understood, a case, a mystery for us to solve. I knew you would find the truth. You always find it. He dropped the locket, its soft clatter lost in the noise of the storm. He fell to his knee, his body shaking with sob, the full, monstrous weight of his guilt and his fractured reality finally crashing down on him. He was a murderer who had hunted himself, and his own damnation was the surprise. Sam stood over him, a statue of grief, his face a mask of agony. The flickering neon light colored them in pulsating shades of green. Two brothers caught in the trap of a tragedy of the mind. He had found the murderer, and the murderer was his reflection. He looked at his broken brother, then at the dark, indifferent sea. Love, loyalty, justice. The three pillars of his life were crumbling into the sea. He slowly, deliberately, reached into his coat and pulled out his badge. He looked at it for a long time, its polished surface reflecting the chaotic light, a symbol of a life and a code that no longer made sense. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, he put it back in his pocket. He turned and walked away, leaving Dean kneeling on the pier, a broken man at the end of the world. He didn't look back. He walked into the pouring rain, his silhouette dissolving into the fog-shrouded street, becoming one with the night. Some mysteries are solved not with a verdict, but with a silent, heart-wrenching choice. Some wounds never heal, and in Etheria, the rain just keeps on falling.